kicks or crazy stuff, so I'll do the best I can. So thank you all for coming out and joining us today. I talk kind of fast, even to my American colleagues, so if I go too fast, just raise your hand, I'll try to slow down. But obviously the topic of today is cost optimization and data security, and achieving those components through a global IT asset disposition program, or ITAD as we call it. My name is Todd Zegers. I'm the Executive Director of our global ITAD operations for Ingram Micro. For those of you who don't know who Ingram Micro is, we're a $45 billion global distributor of technology products and services. We're kind of one of the biggest companies you've never heard of, because typically we sell through reseller channels. But we do have a very large ITAD business. So really, what's the goal of today's presentation is there's a couple main things. Number one is IT executives or CIOs. Data security and risk compliance is a very special topic for you guys. So outside of just data security, the other components that come into play are environmental compliance, as well as asset accountability. And then looking at how you optimize costs through a global ITAD program. And these three components of partner selection, program management, systems and reporting, I'll talk to you a little bit later in the presentation and identify how we do that. So the question we get asked all the time is, can a true global ITAD program be accomplished? And we're going to cover that. So when I ask people if they're a global organization, people define it differently. Some people may think they're global if they've got operations in 20 different countries, or they've got one operation in every continent in the world. So it varies quite a bit. So when I think about a global company, I think of McDonald's. So McDonald's has almost 40,000 restaurants worldwide. They operate in just about every country out there. But as you can see in the greater, whatever this color is on here now, out areas, is they are not in every country. So if your definition of global is that you've got a presence everywhere, there really is no true global company out there. So is there a McITAD, is what I call it. So is there someone that can provide you all these services globally? There really isn't one of those that exists. As Ingram Micro, we have over 30 locations globally that we do IT asset disposition services for, and we still have to leverage a very large network of partners around the rest of the world to deliver services to our clients. So the reality, of my opinion, of what ITAD is more like AT&T. So obviously you can tell I'm from the US, so I use AT&T as my carrier. But when I landed in Barcelona on Sunday, when I started up my phone, I was right away on the Movistar network. Movistar, I'm not sure if that's the right way to pronounce it. So that was where I landed at the airport. When I got to my hotel room, I was then on the Vodafone network, right? So the trick of this is that I have one global carrier that no matter where I go, they're going to handle my services for me, but I'm going to get everything through one centralized bill, and I'm going to get seamless coverage worldwide. And it just works, right? So I'm going to give you a quick example of a customer that we dealt with, and I'll dive into some more of the details, but they had locations in over 50 countries around the world. They're currently using over 40 partners around the world, and it took them over 6 months to get all their employees that are involved with this to figure all this out, right? It's a very complex process. So the first of the three components of a global ITAD program and making sure you're compliant and data security is in the right position. Everybody knows what happens if there's a data breach, right? We like to call ITAD kind of the forgotten part of data security. Everybody's focused on network security and putting routers in place that are secure and making sure that no one has access to your cloud applications, whatever it may be. So we know all these things come into play around data security. So what are you doing with your assets? What do customers do with their assets when they're done using them? How are they making sure they're getting that data off of those devices? And in this business, there's three primary methods of doing that. So the first one I'll talk about is data erasure services. There's typically 3 times you're going to do a data erasure process on your devices. So the first one is something where maybe your CEO has this laptop and he's done with it, he's ready for a new one, he's had it for a year and he wants to give it to another employee. Obviously you want to make sure that all that data is erased from that before you give it to another employee to prevent the fact that they may be able to access to the CEO's information. Another opportunity is where you may have an EMC array, or you've got various servers that are on lease and you have to send that equipment back to the leasing company. You are responsible for the data erasure on those drives or whatever the data bearing devices may be that you're leasing. Typically that's written up in your leasing contract. Most leasing companies partner with companies like us who handle the remarketing, refurbishment, and the data erasure of those devices when it comes back, but contractually, typically, they're not required to do that. And the third time you would use that is when you're decommissioning, whether it's PCs and laptops or tablets or servers or storage equipment, is to erase that equipment if you're going to resell it, meaning that the cost of the data erasure service is outweighed by the remarketing value you can recover on those. So that's the erasure piece of it. Then you get into more of the physical destruction capabilities. So our largest clients, what we see in the market is that large clients, the PCs, desktop, all of your endpoint devices typically have an encryption software in it. So they're usually okay shipping that to you or having you pick that up, collect it, and bring it back in, and provide those data erasure services back at their facilities. Now when you get into the data center space, it's a little bit different. So most large corporations have a no leaving, that's the word I'm looking for. No device that bears data will leave the facility prior to either being erased, degoused, or shredded. Because typically the server equipment, the storage equipment are not encrypted on those drives, so you need to make sure that if an erasure fails on site, you can either degauss it or shred it on site. So the difference between a degausser and a shredder really is, this is obviously a magnet that's got forces, it's going to remove the data from the drive and render it useless. This is going to physically destroy it. So when you have a large site that's in a large metropolitan area, then this is usually a cost-effective, good way to do it. But when you get into more of your remote sites where you've got one or two users at a very distant location that's very expensive to drive a truck and a shredder out there to do that work, a lot of times you can send a degausser on site, perform those services on site, bring it back to the facility, you've got a verified way of destroying the data, and then physically shred it back at the facilities. So okay, so you go through this, you make sure your data is secure, what's the next steps? So your ITAD provider is typically going to try to remarket everything they can. In our business, our companies make money off of refurbishing and reselling the assets. That's how we make our money. So what happens to all the other stuff that gets processed and has to be recycled? The one thing that we talk about with the global program is no single rule applies. How you have to recycle things in Brazil can be very different from how you recycle things in the US. It's very different than how you recycle things in India. Very different from how you may have to recycle things in Germany for various different reasons. Every country you go into has different civil, criminal, company, and various personal even penalties if you don't do it the right way. So once you've got the data security piece completed, everything's erased, the vendor sells it, they recycle everything, they tell you, okay, everything is done, it's been done in an environmentally compliant fashion, you have to get into asset accountability. So when you get audited by someone and they say, okay, listen, I need to see what happened to these 7 servers, what happened to these 4 tablets or these 4 PCs, you need to be able to show them who, what, when, and where did those devices go when you dispose of those. So this is one of the biggest things, and typically we work with a lot of IT asset managers. This is one of the key components they like to focus on. So when you think about these components and doing it globally, and you think about all the different complexities for each one of these in every country you go into, and it's typically not the same requirements, it's a very complex process. So we try to kind of narrow it down and simplify it a bit, really focus on 3 key things, which I'll dive into in a little bit. One is your partner selection or partners. The second one is program management, both your team as well as your vendor's team. And then systems and reporting. Basically the glue that ties all this together and gives you the information, the compliance and security that you need. So when you tie all that together, you're going to get a truly consistent, compliant, and cost-effective asset management solution at the end of life. So I'll start out with partner selection. So the first thing you need to find out is, what are the partner's capabilities, right? Do I just need this partner to do remarketing of my assets? Do I need them just to shred drives on site? There's all kinds of different services you're going to need from your ITAD partner. So you need to find out whether you have one or multiple partners that they're going to be able to do all the services you need. And then even tied to that is a geographic footprint. You may have 7 locations worldwide. Your asset disposal partner may have 5 locations worldwide that match up very well with 5 or 7 facilities. But in 2 of those sites, they may only do ITAD services, meaning just the basic processing and resale of the devices, but they may not be able to do shredding services, for example. So it's key that you're able to find the right partners in the right geographies to deliver the full suite of services you need to encompass a true global, robust IT asset disposal program that meets all your compliance and security requirements. Then you get into legal and compliance. So do any of you have locations in India, China, Philippines, or Brazil? Nobody? Okay. If and when you ever do, it gets very complex. A lot of these countries are going to require you to do various ways of decommissioning those assets. So from the Philippines, for example, you have to get what's called a peasant certificate. So you have to physically decommission the asset, report back to authorities that you're getting rid of that device, do a commercial invoice, and the ITAD provider needs to bring that invoice on site and take those materials from you, showing that they bought them from you. After which the ITAD provider then sends you an invoice for the remarketing credit that what you've got, as well as the fees for transportation or for the data erasure services, whatever they may have done. So having a partner that has a robust legal network that can help support you to make sure you're doing the right things in all of your locations worldwide. Billing and reconciliation. This is another one I tend to gravitate back towards Brazil, India, China, and the Philippines, is most of these countries require you to do in-country billing. So you need to make sure that you have a partner, whether you want to have centralized billing for all of your asset disposal globally, or whether you want to do in-country billing, finding a partner that has enough legal entities throughout the world that can be established to deliver you in-country billing if you want to keep that in that cost center or in that P&L, or has the ability to aggregate all of that, handle all of that, and everything else that comes with doing services internationally, and pull that into one centralized location to give you that single global invoice or credit, if you will. And then contract negotiation and velocity. So if you look back to the example I gave you of someone using partners in 40 different countries, if you're a big company, you know how hard it is to get a contract done. Now imagine doing that 40 times in 40 different countries, potentially different languages, potentially different rules and regulations. Some countries may accept different limits of liability, different ways to transfer title. It's a very complex process. So finding an ITAD partner that's going to be able to give you a global all-encompassing package that can deliver all this is not an easy process. So then we go into program management and day-to-day management near time zone support. So if you think about, I'm based in Phoenix, Arizona, which basically from a time zone perspective, I'm the same as California time zone for the most part. So if I have a customer that's based in the US and they're doing a disposal job in the Philippines, and the truck crashes or the driver doesn't show up or something bad happens on site, if they're only going back to the US to get support and it's 10 o'clock at night, our guys are shut down. You need to make sure whether your vendor, who is a single global vendor for you, or multiple vendors, has the ability to address an issue on site should something go wrong, wherever your IT operations are, where you have devices coming out that need to be disposed of. Corrective action and quality assurance. This is a big one, right? We're in the services business. ITAD service providers are in the service business. Guess what? Things happen. We're not buying and selling a product that's a pre-configured deal and it's pretty much 99.9% going to work for you every time. Things happen. So when things happen, you need to have a partner that's going to be able to provide the right corrective action measures, whether it's them internally with their own employees and their PWIs and their ISO certifications documenting that corrective action, but also managing their partners, making sure that, hey, I had this pickup in Argentina the other day, they messed up, okay, well, we're going to slap them on the wrist, but how do you make sure the next time that doesn't happen? So you need to make sure you have the right corrective actions procedures in place, as well as quality assurance to make sure that they not only say they're doing that, but you're following up to make sure that they're actually executing that, and it's built into their work instructions or their ISO documentation. And change management ties a little bit to this, obviously, but we've seen a lot in the past where a customer may make some changes in how they do the process, but they don't communicate to the vendor, or the vendor may make changes in their systems, and that vendor is sending you different feeds of data points, and they make these changes, but they don't look at all the impacts they may have downstream and going back into your systems to make sure that that doesn't give you bad data feeds and now you have a massive problem. If you have a large volume project or a large volume ITAD program, you can imagine all these feeds with all this asset information that's basically talking to deaf ears because your system can't ingest that information. And then partner management and scale. I talked a little bit about this earlier, but again, with there not being a true global ITAD provider, meaning someone has facilities everywhere, it's really important to make sure you have a partner that can find the right partners in the right locations, but also that has leverage and scale to bring to these guys. So if I think about, let's say, Uruguay, if I wanted to go do a job in Uruguay, but I'm not giving that partner a lot of volume, he's probably not going to give me the best pricing. So we're going to talk a little bit about that piece when we get into the cost allocation piece and the savings. So as you do all this stuff, right, you need the systems and information to tie all that together. So the ability to go in and get the information you need, whether it's from an IT asset management perspective, whether it's going back to your financial controllers, to give them that information, but most importantly in a consistent format. So going back yet again to the customer who had 40 different partners around the world, you can imagine looking at 40 different reports from 40 different partners, how that data is provided back to them. So finding a partner that can deliver the data in the same format, whether it's processed by them or a third party, and normalize all that information, so whether you're taking it into Snow or Altiris or ServiceNow or whatever it may be, that information is always consistent and you see the same thing every time. Reporting features and deliverables. So there's a lot of different things that ITAD providers can give you. They can give you an audit report, they give you a certificate, they can do photographs of the shipments, they can do an on-site serialized capture of the stuff they're picking up. You can provide lists of serial numbers and capture information, scan against it, and bring it back into your facilities. So it's critical that when we're doing this work, that you get all those deliverables and reporting features back to you in the fashion that you need. This is the one I love to talk about. So detailed analytics and business reviews. So you get rid of your old ITAD stuff and you think, okay, well, it's gone. I got rid of 50 computers last week. I got rid of 100 printers here and there. But taking that data and doing something meaningful with it is a whole different story. And I'll give you a real world example. We had a medical device manufacturer in the US that did disposals from 5 locations. They just refreshed about 1,000 laptops. And let's say every site had about 200 laptops. 4 of the 5 sites got about $100 back in credit for every laptop they gave us. But there was one facility that got nothing back. And why do you think that was? Well, the technician at that site decided that, hey, there's a bunch of memory and some hard drives, some keyboards, some screens. So he went in there and basically started harvesting the parts and components to save to use potentially to repair the stuff down the road. So by doing detailed analytics and business reviews with customers, a good vendor should be able to provide you analytics into, hey, listen, you have 5 locations, 4 got money back, these guys didn't, here's the assets they got, here's a breakdown of what happened to those assets, and this is the reason why. So you can work with your vendor to make sure that they're doing the right thing, but also your employees to make sure your employees are being good stewards of your electronic devices and your costs. And then systems integration. I mentioned this a second ago. More and more large customers want to have data feeds done, whether it's a nightly feed, whether it's real-time feed, etc. But an example I can give you for one of our large customers is they use a product called Snow for asset management. So when they dispose of that asset in Snow, it's going to flag that asset as queued for disposal. It then sends an order to us. We receive it into our system, and we can give them real-time data showing it's scheduled for pickup, it's in transit, it's hit the dock, it's in our sorting process, it's in the data erasure station, it's been recycled, it's been sold, here's what it's sold for, and here's the date. So more and more customers want to be able to take in feeds from their ITAD providers to update real time within their asset management software, so if they do get audited, and the auditor says, hey, here's 5 serial numbers, I need you to show me what happened to it, all that data, let's say potentially from those 40 partners, now goes through one centralized interface, gets fed into your asset management system. Now you've got one place to go and look and see exactly what happened to those 5 serial numbers. You can say these 5 sold on March 13th. They were erased by Stephen Baggin at 7:42 p.m. using Longo data erasure software, and it was sold to XYZ. So getting that information into your systems is tricky, but once you get it, it's a very robust and a good process. So this is where I wrap it up. My fast talking got me through just in time, it looks like. So the 3 pieces that I focused on was the partner selection piece, the program management piece, and the systems and reporting. So this ties mostly into data security and compliance, environmental compliance, as well as asset tracking. So you asked, well, how does that address my issues with cost optimization? So if you think about the 40 partner example, if you think about how many employees you have to have spending time on your IT asset management team working with the vendors, and you got your legal department involved, etc. If you can consolidate that and narrow it down to as few processes and as few people involved in that exercise as possible, you're going to save a lot of costs. If you find a vendor that can give you a single global ITAD approach, that's fantastic. Maybe you have a couple, but you have to work with less people, which means less emails, less time on the phone, etc. because 1 or 2 or 3 vendors understand all of your requirements, and they can take and carry those out again within their own facilities and leverage it down to the partners. Having a global system is probably one of the most important pieces of this, is you need that single pane of glass for when you get audited, or you need to make sure that a certain serial number or a certain hard drive is erased on a certain date. So having that single global system to access to get you that information on a moment's notice is extremely critical. So that's it. Any questions? We're right over there at booth 212. I'll be happy to talk to you. Thank you for joining us this evening. Hope you guys have a great show. Appreciate it.